I'll start with one of my favorite quotes of all time. Leaders are visionaries with a poorly developed sense of fear and no concept of the odds against them. Now, considering y'all have signed up to be district governors and membership chairs, I'm feeling that you probably qualify with this poorly developed sense of fear. And I'm also presuming that you may have not completely grasped the odds against you. But there's more to this quote. They make the impossible happen. And that's what you've signed up for, is to make the impossible happen over the course of this next year. This is from Robert Jarvik, the inventor of the artificial heart. So my job today is to deliver you some straight talk to help you understand the odds against you. Let's talk about identifying membership challenged clubs. First, to say that this membership thing is not a district thing, it's a club thing. We have to fix the clubs at the club level in order to fix membership overall. There's nothing we can do across the district, and there is zero overall blanket strategy that we found that can be implemented across the district. It's a club thing. We found this out by a project that Chris Jones challenged me with to develop a predictive metric to identify future growth successes and challenges of clubs. This is, of course, what you also want from your stockbroker, is a predictive metric. So we set about analyzing 6 years of data from 16 districts, 846 Rotary clubs. That is a pretty large data set to be able to roll around in. And we had some encouraging results. First of all, it is not true that Rotary clubs in general are declining in membership. It is true that North America in general is declining in membership, but that's simply because more Rotary clubs are failing than succeeding with respect to membership. Many clubs are consistently growing, some districts are growing, and some zones are growing in North America and surely in all other parts of the world. But here's what we learned. As Patrick pointed out, attrition is real across the zone, stretching all the way from the South Carolina-Georgia border up now through Western Pennsylvania. On average, we lose 14% of our members a year, and all clubs lose members every year. I mean, there is a one outlier out of several hundred on occasion that has zero membership losses. These attrition rates, interestingly, are remarkably consistent from year to year. The same club tends to lose members at about the same rate, but they're widely variable among clubs. Why is that? Well, it's because some clubs are a whole lot better at retaining members than others. Now, retention. Retention is essential. And the truism of that, of course, is for every member you keep, that's one member you don't have to replace. But as Patrick mentioned, this is highly overrated. Think about this. Retention is highly overrated as a growth strategy. You can't retain your way from 22 to 25 members. You sooner or later have to go out and find some. What we also learned is that the likelihood of membership growth in any given year is not at all random. In fact, the past is a very good predictor of the future, unlike your mutual fund. The growing clubs of the past tend to grow year after year at about an 80% likelihood rate. And interestingly, also the declining clubs, those that are failing in membership, continue to fail. About an 80% likelihood of that as well. And then there's a group of clubs in the middle. I call them the stable balance or holding your own clubs. Now, those are defined as growth over a 3-year window of no more or less than 5%. In other words, a 40-member club that doesn't move beyond 38 to 42 is kind of in that middle zone. It's almost break even, if you will. Here's what the face of chronic membership decline looks like. This is a club in my own district, and this is a club that started out honing their skills at losing membership at a rate of about 1 member per year. And then you'll notice back in 2010, 2011, curiously, when a lot of people were having to choose between Rotary and groceries, they figured out a way to string 2 tiny incremental growth years together. But that former practice paid off. They got really good at losing members and accelerated that over the past 8 years or so at a 3.3 member per year rate. In other words, losing 10 members on average every 3 years. You notice it's almost straight line. And you'll notice also that you don't have to be a Rhodes Scholar in trend analysis to see where this is going. This is going towards a 9-member club in July of 2023. Now, everything I'll be talking about today in terms of these membership trends, the caveat to this is unless something changes. And frankly, folks, that's a pretty safe caveat because in my experience, not a whole lot changes in most Rotary clubs from year to year. But in the case of this club, a new sheriff came to town last year. A new sheriff in town in 2018-19 found them with a net gain of 5 members. It is possible that they're on the road to snapping this streak. The good news is I looked just the day before yesterday so I could fill you in on the obvious question of how are they doing at holding that ground. They have held that ground at +5 members or net 30 through this point in this year for better than half the year. They've replaced 4 members, they've lost 4 members, which for a club this size is about where you'd expect to be. So I'm encouraged. I'm not convinced, but I'm encouraged. This tale will be told over the next 2-3 years. Here's another approach. This is also a club in my district. This is a club that has grown themselves from 119 to 180 members. Would you believe that? Over this 15-year window we're looking at here. Now you'll notice they've had a couple of years of moderate membership decline, but other than that, this has been moderate membership growth, which is exactly what we're looking for. And if you wonder what moderate means, in my book, moderate membership growth is growth in the 5 to 10% range. Now you'll notice this isn't anything flashy. In fact, once you get to numbers like 180, even 5% growth is a challenge, but they've managed to add a couple, 3, 4 members each year over time, and it's given them this net growth. This is what a growth culture actually looks like. And that's what this club has, is a growth culture. We've used the term attrition, and it may be one of the first times you've heard that term in Rotary because everything that's published from Rotary International is focused on the idea of retention. Why is that, you might ask? Well, I'm told by the folks in Evanston that that's because retention is positive. And then there's also something about how that translates better to other languages. I'm not sure about that. But using attrition versus retention clarifies what this spread is between the rate we gain and lose members. Now, they're the same number. Attrition is just 100% minus retention. If you had 100 clubs and you kept 89% of your members, or 89, your attrition rate would be 11. Somewhat goes without saying, but it is beyond the math skills of most Americans. If I speak to a club and say I'm concerned because I see you have a retention rate of 86% and you're only attracting members at a rate of 12%, they just look at me like, so what? Because the two numbers are not comparable. 86% retention is true, but it's useless. If I'm a club president, I don't need to know how many members I'm likely to retain. I need to know how many I'm likely to lose, because that's how many I'm going to need to replace. So if I say your club has an attrition rate of 14% and an attraction rate of 12%, all of a sudden a light bulb goes on. They say, oh, we're losing 2% a year. They get it. So that's why the data that we're about to review together here is based on this concept of attrition rather than using the reciprocal, essentially, which is attrition. So the essential lessons are these. First of all, attrition is real. And here's how tightly compacted that is. If we look across Zone 33, the average, again, from South Carolina through Pennsylvania is about 14% a year. Interestingly, the last year for which I had full data was RI's data for 17-18. Their attrition rate worldwide, our attrition rate worldwide, is exactly 14.1%. Absolutely incredible. I also have on the screen here this idea of what is world class. Well, world class is when you get down to the life happens level. We're going to lose Rotarians. We're a membership organization. Membership organizations lose members. The average U.S. Trade Association loses members at 15% a year. World class is about 10%. Why do I say that? Because what I see is a bottom around 8 to 10%. And that looks like pretty much the clubs that are expert at retaining members don't have retention any better than something in that 8 to 10% range. So what that says is that if your club already has a low attrition rate down in that 8, 10, 12% range, you can't get much better by working hard at that. That's pretty much as good as it gets. Sooner or later, you're going to have to go find some new members. Now, the reverse is true. Attrition rates of above 15% need attention. That means members are voting with their feet. They voted with their wallets to come in. They're voting with their feet to leave. And why is that? Well, it's because of the club experience. As Chris Jones loves to say, members don't leave Rotary. They leave Rotary clubs. They don't just wake up one morning and say, you know that four-way test thing? I'm not really sure about that. That's not the way it happens. They leave their club because they're not happy with the experience they're getting. We've talked about retention, essential as a membership strategy, but solo, it's not going to work. Sooner or later, your attraction rate has to exceed your attrition rate. Seems to go without saying, but I think it is worth saying. And yes, if you're wondering, these slides will be available in a Dropbox after we finish up today. But you need to know your club's history. Why is that? Because I've learned in a career of problem solving, I'm an engineer like Patrick by training, and essential to problem solving, folks, is knowing exactly what problem you're trying to solve. And this is down at the club level. Is the club failing due to attrition? Is the club failing due to attraction? Or is the club failing through a combination of both, losing members too fast and attracting them too slow? Now, that being said, not all Rotary clubs are shrinking. Roughly 25 to 30% of your clubs do not have a membership problem. We need to identify who those are, help them double down on what's working and get out of their way. That brings up lesson number 5, which is essential to problem selection. I like to try to select problems that I think I have a likelihood of being able to solve. And the way you do that is you need to know exactly where and how big the problems are. Who are your growth clubs? Who are your declining clubs? And who are those clubs in that middle, in that fragile balance of plus minus 5% over a 3-year window? So that's when we created the Membership Growth Index. We've been watching this thing now for about 4 years. It's proved out remarkably well, and folks, it's dirt simple. It is simply the percentage of growth or decline over a 3-year window. Now that, of course, ends July 1st. You really can't tell anything by the ups and downs in the middle. So the data you have in front of you is July 1st, 2019, compared to July 1st, 2016. The question is, how did they get there? How did they get to success, or how did they get to failure? It could be their attrition rate. Now, I'll define the attrition rate. That's the average number of terminations versus the average size of the club. Now, this is annualized, of course. We used a 3-year average, but then the data you have in front of you is annualized. The attraction rate's exactly the same thing. The average number of new members inducted versus the average size of the club over the same window. And of course, the growth rate is simply the difference. The rate at which they attracted members less the rate at which they lost members. And you can see that in your MGI report, calculated to 0.1%. So if you'll pull up your MGI alongside you, kind of hold it over to the side of the screen. I'm not picking on anybody here, but this is a real district. And I selected this district because it has some very interesting attributes that we want to take a look at. Let me show you how to read this. First thing you look at is the attrition rate, and we're just looking at the green zone clubs, the green line clubs that have grown over the past 3 years. And what you'll notice is that the attrition rates in red, by the way, are those that are above the district average, not the zone average, but the district average. In this case, you only see a handful of clubs here that have an attrition issue. You see it one at 18.9, one at 16.7, one at 19. Yeah, these are not awful, but they're high attrition. The rest of these clubs don't have an attrition problem. In fact, the rest of these clubs are pretty darn good at keeping members. Look at these attrition rates. I told you that world class is in the 8 to 10% range, and you see some here in the 5, 4, 6% range. Incredible. Absolutely awesome. Now, I've heard, and you probably have too, I've heard it stated by Rotary directors, I've heard it stated by Rotary presidents that, you know, we in Rotary are pretty good at attracting members. We're just not that good at keeping them. Well, I can't find validation for that statement in the data. Here's a group of clubs that are really good at keeping members. It happens that the same clubs are also good at attracting members. You'll notice attraction rates here in the 10, 12, 13, 25, 30% range. Unbelievable, and it is what puts them on the membership growth index positive or green line group. Let's take a look at the group in the middle. That's a little different story. But again, notice this. This idea that we're not so good at keeping them, wrong. These clubs are all really good at keeping members. However, none of them have taken advantage of that. None of them have taken advantage of the fact that they're really good at keeping members. In fact, they're mediocre at best at attracting members. They also don't fit the mantra that I hear from Rotary leadership. But take a look at this. This is really good news. These are the prior years MGIs, okay, the years prior to 2019, and you'll notice that many of these clubs, something different has happened. Many of these clubs were on the declining, chronic decline group in the prior years. They've moved themselves over the course of this past year, or they bottomed out and they're on a recovery. They've moved themselves over the course of this past year into this plus minus 5% range that gets them in this yellow group. So these are clubs that you should approach with some caution, but at least for the recent past, they've kind of started to get it figured out. Now let's look at the red group. This is a group of clubs you want to worry about. But again, let's look at the data. It is so important to know what problem you're trying to solve. You'll notice, first of all, that you can validate to some extent the fact that these groups are in this red line group because they've been there. It's the bottom half of these clubs are the same group of clubs that have been failing all this time. They're the clubs that cost you members in not only 2018-19, but 17-18, 16-17, 15-16. It's the same group of clubs. These clubs are failing at membership. There's just no other way to state it. There isn't any positive way to describe failure. Let's take a look now at their attrition rates. The top half of this group is not failing because of attrition. In fact, these clubs, again, are pretty good at keeping members. What they're awful at is attracting members. Now let's go look at the rest of these. Even the bottom half of the group are failing by and large because of their inability to attract members at a reasonable rate. You'll notice only a handful of those in the blue, which is above the district average of attrition rate. Let's look now at some specifics. Here's a classic. Here are a couple of clubs right together, both 24, 25 members. I'm not picking on anybody here. This is just fact. These clubs have held on to members at world-class rates, 10 and 11% attrition rates over this past 3 years that we've been measuring. But look at what they've done as far as attraction. 0.3 of a member a year means that each of these clubs figured out a way, 25-member clubs, to attract only 1 member in 3 years. You cannot maintain Rotary membership by bringing 1 member into your Rotary club every 3 years. Here's another one that brought 2 members into their club over 3 years. And here's a club that brought 3 members into their club over 3 years for an average of 1. So what you'll notice, of course, is that each of these on the right-hand column has a net membership loss rate commensurate with the rate that they've lost and gained these members. Here's a fact. When you see attraction rates like these in the attraction rate column on this page, below 10%, those are a guarantee of club decline. Why is that? Keep in mind that 10% attrition is about world-class. If you don't have a mechanism in place to attract members at a rate better than 10%, you're going to be losing ground. You can just set your watch by it. So some simple success targets. Chris Jones challenged me to make this really simple. If you didn't have any data on the club whatsoever, you could simply say that if you maintain an attrition rate below 15%, meaning a 40-member club lost fewer than 6 members, and maintain an attraction rate above 20%, meaning a 40-member club gains 8 members, you have a net 5% membership growth. You're right in the sweet spot of that consistent, moderate membership growth that we're talking about. So the takeaways I'd like you to make from this segment is, first, that this attrition thing is real. It's easily calculated. All this data comes right out of reports in RI. There are reports you can get, but to merge them into what you see as the MGI, it takes actually 3 different reports out of RI to merge this data together. You have to attract members faster than you lose them. And chronic membership decline, in our experience, is literally a symptom of leadership dysfunction within the club. A leadership that doesn't have its act together will be shown out, will be called out by chronic membership decline year after year. And here's the message to y'all. If these clubs could fix themselves, they would have already. If these were businesses and they realized that they were losing customers year after year after year, they couldn't figure out how to fix that themselves, what would they do? They'd hire somebody who knew how to attract customers to help them learn how to do that. That's where we are with these clubs, folks. These guys can't fix themselves. It's going to take some tough love. It's going to take some frank conversation, and it probably is going to take some intervention to help these clubs get better. Now, did you know that Rotary membership was seasonal? You know, seasonality we usually think of as spring, summer, winter, fall, but our seasonality is a little bit different because we have imposed seasonality upon ourselves. We bill twice a year, meaning that we bill in July, we bill in January. So clubs that have members on the books in those months get a bill. They react exactly rationally as you'd expect. They clear their books in June and they clear their books in December to avoid that membership billing on a semi-annual basis. So it's a self-inflicted seasonality, but it's a seasonality that most district leaders go into the year not understanding. And then they're horribly surprised in the last week of June when their membership gain melts away and they find themselves in the hole, a net loss despite how hard they worked over the course of the year. So if we were a seasonal business, we'd understand this seasonality. If we were selling Christmas trees or strawberries or anything else, we'd understand that we pretty much had to make our year in a 2-3 month window. Retail is not that dissimilar. They make their year between about November 1st and the end of January. So what we've done is we've modeled a success track. What would you have to do to overcome this annual seasonality? I'd like to explain the success track to you. This is the basis of the weekly membership update that we give you. Districts lose roughly 1% of their membership during the last few days or hours of December. They lose even more, 2% of their membership during the last few days or hours of June. So what does that look like? To finish the year with a net gain of even 0.5%, which actually in this business is definition of success, we need to go into December with a net gain of well more than the 1% we expect to lose, or something like 2%, to survive the year up, the December 31 up 1%. And we need to do the same thing in June, only we need to go into June stronger because we know we're going to lose 2%. We need to be up at least 2.5% to 3% on the 1st of June. So for a 2,000 member district, round numbers, makes the math easy. Here's what that success track looks like. Starts at a dead start on July 1st, and we need to grow our way up to plus 40 members by the 1st of December so that we can survive the end of the December with this predictable 1% membership loss, and we'll still be out of the hole, we'll be plus 20, and we'll be on track to begin building membership over the second half when the clubs really should be hitting their stride, so that we end the 1st of June up 2.5% at least, because we know we're going to lose about 2% of our membership. That would leave us at 0.5% net gain. So we ramp all the way up to plus 40, we zigzag down to 20 in December, start in January, we ramp all the way, we need to be at plus 50 members. Now, what I usually see in a 2,000 member district is along about April, May, they're all excited about plus 10 or plus 20, forgetting completely that they're going to lose 40 of those members in June. You need to be on this success track in order to be somewhat assured of ending your year at or above break even. And you're saying to yourself, Terry, seriously? Is that for real? Yeah, folks, that's for real. We publish this data each week. Each of you are on that distribution list. If you're not, please let Patrick know. And this tiny URL is a permalink to that for 2019-20, tinyurl.com/2019-20 membership zone 33. Here's the other thing. Let's not forget this continues through midnight, June 30th, all the way as the hours tick away. And I've actually watched this, folks, on June 30th. It's almost like watching Yahoo Finance and watching a stock price. You can almost see the numbers move over the course of that afternoon. So let's take a look at July 1st, June 1st to July 1st, 2015. This is Rotary data globally. The numbers over on the left-hand side are 1,230,000 down to 1,190,000. That's roughly the axis over here. Look at this. 22,000 members disappeared in 1 month. Same thing happened again in 2016, June, the month of June. 24,000 members disappear off Rotary's books in 1 month. 2017, same story, and 2018 was unfortunately kind of a world's record at a net loss of 34,000 members in 30 days. You can see for yourself also the December zigs in the middle, but they aren't quite as dramatic as the ones at the end of the year. So to finish the year with a net gain of about 0.5%, keep in mind, you need to go into December 1st with a net gain of 2. You need then to start ramping to a net gain of at least 2.5% by June 1st to end the year positive. Now, the data we provide you week to week has that success track marked in the green dots, and we'll go over that in detail a couple of weeks from now in one of our future calls. So I'm hoping that you'll buy into this data. It's proven itself year after year after year. This stuff is real. The seasonality is real. Attrition is real. And if we can help our clubs understand that they need to get started on July 1, not September, not October, July 1. They need to have membership committees together now that are getting their wheels lined up to get a running start on July 1st. Again, we'll publish this membership data to you weekly, and I'm certainly available. You all know where to reach me. I'm certainly available to take time with you on the phone or in email if any of this is not clear enough for you to explain across your districts and across your clubs. We do have about a minute loose here. If we do have some time to take a question or two, if there are any, either text those or chat those to Patrick, or just sing out.
Yeah, I said thank you, Terry. Thank you for taking us through that. As you can tell, Terry has taken a very deep dive and now has years of information to establish these trends. This is real stuff, and he's imparting that because we, as I said before, we want you to understand July 1 what you're up against, instead of the experience I had in August of 2015, looking back at a year as governor, saying, "Whoa, where'd all those members go?" So thank you, Terry. And next up is Carol Burdett, who is going to talk to us about building and motivating membership teams.
Thank you, Patrick, and thank you, Terry. I would say as an immediate past district governor, the last weekend in June of 2019, yes, I was up over 40 members as a district, and then in the very last 2 days of the month, we then ended up just at even. It was like just like Terry predicted.